Okay, so good morning everyone. I'll make it 10 a.m. So welcome to this formal meeting of the Public Protection and Community Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Nigel Pepper, Chairman of this committee. Councillor Adam Stokes, Vice Chairman of this committee, is also in attendance here on my right. The audio-visual feed of this formal public meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded on the County Council's website following this meeting. I'd like to begin with a health and safety announcement. There is no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, we'll need to leave the council chamber through the rear doors and leave the building through the reception into the front car park. We then need to wait in the car park until further instructions. Before we move on further with the main business of this meeting, can I remind you that if you wish to ask a question during the course of the meeting, can you please raise your hand? Can I also remind members of the committee to switch on their microphones when invited to speak? To speak close to the microphone and switch their microphone off after they make their contributions. I would like to also welcome officers presenting today who are participating live via Microsoft Teams. Can I ask that you introduce yourselves at the beginning of your item or when you make a contribution, please? To ask questions or contribute during the meeting, please raise your hand virtually or even type speak in the chat function. Requests to speak will be collated by my Vice Chairman. Please can you keep your questions and contributions succinct and concise, and can I ask everyone to ensure their mobiles, laptops, iPads and anything else that might make a noise silent, please. We'll now move on to the formal agenda. Agenda item 1. Apologies for absence, replacement councillors. I understand Councillor Mrs. Sneath is attending remotely due to personal reasons. I also understand Councillor Danny and Councillor King are also attending remotely. Emily, do you wish to add any further to that?
No further apologies, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Item 2, declarations of councillors' interests. Do any members wish to declare any interest which may have not been declared on their declaration of pecuniary interest forms? Councillor Key.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is on my declaration form, but I do have a pecuniary interest in item 5. As an independent funeral celebrant, I could be deemed to be a competitor to the registration service for celebratory and commemorative events. So I would like to leave the chamber for that item, please.
Thank you for that, Councillor Key. Item 3. Minutes of the previous meeting of the Public Protection and Community Scrutiny Committee held on the 21st of September 2021. I'll just go through those page by page for accuracy. So I'll start on page 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and finally page 15. So this item is to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting as a correct record. Do I have a proposer for that, please? Okay, Vice Chairman proposed. Anyone wish to second? Do I have a seconder for the minutes? Councillor Gray. Thank you, Councillor Gray. So all those in favour of that, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Those against? Any abstentions? Is that an abstention, Councillor Key?
Yes, I wasn't here.
Okay, thank you. Councillor, Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Although I wasn't at the previous meeting, I did submit a number of questions through Democratic Services afterwards, and I'd like to thank the officers for their responses. It was very informative. I'd like that recorded if I may, please.
Yeah, I did see those, so yeah, thank you for that. Thank you. Item 4, announcements by the Chairman, executive councillors and lead officers. I'd just like to say from my point of view there's a shorter agenda this morning. Nevertheless, I'd like to ask officers to only summarise the key points of their reports and what is required of the committee. I'll turn to executive council announcements. I'm not sure if we've got Councillor Lindsay Corey with us today remotely, have we? Councillor Corey?
Yes, good morning, Chairman. Good morning, colleagues. I have no executive member announcements. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mrs Sue Woolley.
Thank you, Chairman. I have no executive announcements.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Councillor Daniel McNally, if we have him with us this morning. No, we've not got him remotely. Okay. So, lead officers, senior officers, are there any officer announcements from the lead officers, such as Lee Surdyfield, Mark Baxter, Nicole Hilton and Diane Colson? If you can hear me remotely, is there anything you wish to add to this?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Okay, nothing else filtering through, so we'll move on to the agenda proper. Item 5, Lincolnshire registration and celebratory service annual report. This item is on page 17 to 20 of the agenda pack and intends to update the committee on the service delivered by the registration and celebratory service and to outline the continued impact and disruption the COVID-19 pandemic has had on the service. The report will be presented by James Chappell, Head of Registration, Celebratory and Coroner Services, who is attending today via Teams. So over to you, James.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning all. You'll find the full report on pages 17 to 20 of the agenda. This morning I will summarise the key points and then welcome any questions. 2021 has been another challenging and disrupted year for Lincolnshire Registration Service. Lockdown, government restrictions and the government roadmap has greatly impacted delivery. Despite this, the service has remained open to the public, undertaking face-to-face appointments in COVID-safe environments throughout the year. Deaf registrations have remained the priority throughout the year for the service, and the Coronavirus Act easements have continued to be used, with deaf registrations being registered via telephone, and will continue to be used until they expire in March 2022. Whilst we haven't seen the large spike of deaths witnessed in April 2020, levels of registrations across the year have been high, and overall volumes are in line with 2020 deaf registration numbers. As we move into the winter months, the service is expecting an increase in deaths. Planning for this increase is in place, and the service is confident it can meet the demand for registrations if required. Birth and notice of marriage appointments have taken place face-to-face this year, even during lockdown. Over 3,000 birth registrations have taken place, and appointments remain available for parents to register their children. Over 4,000 notice of marriage appointments have also been undertaken. Ceremonies have been heavily disrupted this year. Many of these have been rearranged on multiple occasions due to changing rules on lockdowns and social gatherings. A return to large celebrations came in July, resulting in unprecedented levels of demand. In order to meet this demand, registration staff and wider council staff have stepped up to accommodate these requests. Training of additional council staff has been vital in meeting this challenge and meant that more couples were able to have their special day, and as a service we were able to conduct greater numbers of weddings and civil partnerships. This challenge does not stop here. Due to the uncertainty caused by the pandemic in 2021, many couples have deferred their ceremonies until 2022, and we are expecting 2022 to be a very, very busy year for weddings. Moving into 2022, the registration service will be improving its accessibility to the public and enhancing its customer offering. A new registrar system will be introduced, allowing online appointment bookings and online payments to be made. Enhancements around wedding ceremonies will see the introduction of an online ceremony planner and new wedding packages being made available. In 2022, I would also like to propose a change to the timing of this future report. If agreeable, I would like to present the report following the end of the financial year, ensuring you receive the end of year update at the earliest opportunity. To conclude, the service has faced another challenging year due to the disruption caused by the pandemic, and staff have worked incredibly hard to register and undertake the volume of events this year. Whilst we're hopeful 2022 will be less disrupted, there are still significant challenges ahead around winter depth pressures and the demand for ceremonies, which will make 2022 another busy year for the registration service. Thank you, Chairman, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, James. Before we move on, Councillor Woolley, Executive, would like to bring her in at this point.
Thank you, Chairman, and I'm grateful to you for giving me this opportunity to just absolutely place on record my thanks to our officers and indeed all of those working within the registration service. They really have worked so hard to keep that service going in really difficult circumstances, and also to those officers within LCC who actually stepped up to the plate when asked if there was anyone who would be prepared to take on training so they too could act as a celebrant. It has made an enormous difference and I'm most grateful to everybody. So thank you to James and indeed the whole team.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Woolley. I'd now like to invite members of the committee to comment on this item. I know I've got one person already, Councillor Mrs Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. I've got a couple of questions, actually. It mentions on page 18 that staffing levels have been impacted due to retirements and staff leaving the service. Can you tell me how many staff did leave the service over the last 12 months? And also, how long does it take to train a celebrant to work in this type of work? Because obviously it's going to be needed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Clark. James, are you able to answer that, please?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. So we have lost 6 registration staff due to retirement and other moves to other jobs or to pursue different careers. And we have also seen a number of celebrants. I haven't got the exact number, but they are currently on relief contracts, so they can leave the service quite easily. So we have been impacted by staff leaving. To get a registrar fully trained in all disciplines, as registration is very complex, it does take several months to get them fully trained to be able to undertake births, deaths, notice of marriage and all registration disciplines. The celebrant side of it and what we've been doing with wider council staff is a set period of training, which is classroom based and then shadowing. So we're able to get those deployed very, very quickly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mr Clark.
Thank you very much. I've got a couple of questions, actually. If I give them one at a time, maybe the officer can respond accordingly. I note on your document about the marriages and civil partnerships, and you've stated there about the expected rise. I know you've taken on extra staff to be trained to meet the requirements, but are the registration offices or officers working extended hours to cope with the number of requests? And also, can the fabric of the building actually cope with all this extra traffic?
So the answer to that is yes. We operate 7 days a week for registration and marriages. The buildings, we operate from 12 sites across the county and they can accommodate the increased traffic.
Thank you for that. I noticed as well you've got a new IT system. Can I ask a couple of questions? Is this just bespoke to Lincolnshire, or is it a tried and tested system that we know we can rely on? Because I know sometimes taking on new systems, there are lots of glitches in the system. Thank you.
This is a tried and tested system. It is the leading bespoke service to registration offices across England and Wales, and is used by over 100 local authorities.
Thank you for that. And for my last question, you mentioned there about the 12 registration offices. Having never had to use one, I have no idea of their locations. Obviously, people can find this on the internet. Can you advise me, do we ever use the county magazine to highlight locations and contact points and opening hours? Thank you.
I'll have to take that one away. As far as I'm aware, I don't believe we do. All of the information is provided on the website and by the contact centre.
Okay, thank you. I understand Councillor Mrs Sneath would like to speak.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everyone. Yes, following on actually from Councillor Clark's question, page 19, we talk about next steps and the introduction of the new IT system. Just concerned about people who don't use IT. Will they still be accommodated to be able to ring up or call in? Do they have to use IT? Because there are still people out there who, are not using IT too much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we will be an accessible service. They'll be able to access via phone. They'll be able to walk into the Register Office within Lincoln to inquire, and they'll also be able to go via telephone via the contact centre.
Thanks very much. That answers that then. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I can't see anyone else wishing to speak. Okay, thank you. James, a couple of points on page 17, a couple of typos there I wish to point out. The last paragraph, it says government restrictions on gatherings have meant face-to-face and celebratory events were heavily restricted. The service had to limit attendees in line, what's that? In line national restrictions. I think it probably should be in line with national restrictions. And the
Thank you, Chairman. Noted.
And the second paragraph from the bottom, it says the service has remained open to the public throughout 2021. Offices continued to operative. I guess that should be operate as COVID secure environments.
Thank you. Noted.
Okay, thank you. Just a question on birth registrations. Have they been, I couldn't see in the report, have they been done over the telephone similar to deaths, or have they been face-to-face visits?
No, there is no legal provision for them to be done via the telephone. All births have taken place face-to-face.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I couldn't see it in the report. I think we've probably got another typo there at the bottom of page 18. It says midway of that paragraph, the registration service responded to heightened levels of customer inquiries. Should that be heightened levels of customer inquiries?
Yes, you are correct. Noted.
Okay, thank you. I notice love is in the air. We've got a high demand for getting married. And bottom of page 19, the conclusion is, if agreed, the registration and celebratory service gives the commitment present its annual report from the end of the financial year, aligning with service requirement to annual report to the Home Office. Additionally, the service would welcome the opportunity to provide updates throughout the year. So I'd just like to bring Karen on this one regarding how often we want to meet, and have this come back to us, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So in line with the number of meetings that we hold on each year, I would propose that we receive, as proposed by the report, that we receive the annual report right after the end of the financial year, and then that we receive another additional updating report at midway, halfway through the year. So essentially around September or November of the year. Thank you.
So we're suggesting a 6-month basis. Yeah, sure, yeah. James, are you any thoughts on that, please?
I would welcome that opportunity to present more frequently as we move forward.
Okay, thank you. So the actions of this is that members of the Public Protection and Community Scrutiny Committee are invited to review and comment on the content of the report, to comment on the level of service achieved, and to consider revised timings of future reports. I cannot see anyone else wishing to speak. As far as I'm aware, there's no one else remotely wishing to speak. So I'm going to move that the committee receive and note the report and request that annual updates are aligned with the end of the financial year going forward. We also request that additional updates are shared with this committee on a 6-monthly basis. Can you please raise your hand if you agree? Yeah, all in the chamber agree with that. That's unanimous. Thank you. We'll then now move on to item 6. Whilst Just wait for Cara to recall Councillor Key. Who seems to have gone missing. Okay, so item 6, Community Hub's 5-year update. Excuse me. This report is found on pages 21 to 25 of the agenda pack, and it provides the committee with an update on the Community Hub model. The report was presented by Louise Egan, who is the Library and Heritage Client Lead. So over to you, Louise.
Thank you, Chair. As mentioned, I'm Louise Egan. I'm the Client Lead for Libraries and Heritage for the Authority, and this report is to provide an update on this last year of the Library Community Hub model and seeks to ask members to consider and comment on the information provided. So in 2016, the Library Service redesign saw the introduction and creation of the Community Hubs. So these are community-run facilities operated by volunteers on the whole. They do receive a small financial support from Lincolnshire County Council and professional operational support from GLL, so that's Greenwich Leisure Limited, our outsourced library provider. And they provide support such as book stock, helping with book weeding, helping gaining volunteers and maintaining them, training them up in all of the relevant areas. And also ensuring that there is PC provision for our library users and customers and that they can access the library system and the library catalogue. On the whole, they are independent and they have autonomy and freedom over the delivery of the service within their sites, and that's specifically in terms of the opening hours that they are available to members of the community and also the events and how they use their sites. So many of our community hubs take the opportunity to hire rooms and spaces out to be able to provide much needed and vital income into their service. We do ask that they're open for a minimum of 6 hours a week, and that's for 50 weeks of the year. And at the minute, we have 34 community hubs spread across all of Lincolnshire. I think it's worthwhile to note that they are doing really, really well at the minute, especially given the recent context and environment in which we've all been working through as a result of COVID and the ongoing restrictions that we have all encountered over the past 18 months. COVID has really shown that these sites and community hubs are relied upon by members of our community, and it's been highlighted how much they were missed by both the volunteers themselves and also our users. They were probably hit the hardest from a library service perspective, as many of the volunteers themselves were classed as vulnerable and clinically vulnerable, and therefore were unable to continue delivering the service and open the sites up for the majority of the year, unfortunately. We did close in line with the central government requirements back in March 2020, and we were then able to reopen our sites in August of 2020. Initially, that was for the click and collect service, so where customers could come to the door of the buildings, collect pre-reserved items, or grab bags of items that were made up that customers might like to loan and borrow, and then obviously return back to their homes. Towards the end of September in 2020, we were able to move towards a browsing model, so that meant that customers were once again able to come into the site and to be able to browse for the stock that they wanted and also use the public network computers themselves. Unfortunately, in January of 2021, we did have to close the sites down again in line with the national lockdown, and it was only in April of this year, 21, that they did reopen again. In advance of any openings, we did go through a rigorous risk assessment process with each and every community hub to ensure that the safety of both the volunteers and our customers were paramount. And this was a multifunctioning team that did this, including members of property services, to ensure that all of the restrictions were adhered to, the additional sanitisers and space requirements were adhered to, but also looking at the layout of the sites to see where they could be changed to enhance that social distancing and one-way systems where that was permitted and allowed. I think since reopening, it's fair to say again that they have gone from strength to strength. All of the sites have commented on how much they appreciate the support both from the local authority and from GLL in being able to reopen. As mentioned, a lot of the customers and volunteers were really pleased when we will be able to offer that service back up again. And if you look in the report on page 24, you can see some of those comments included. Issues, so physical issues of books borrowed at the community hubs have increased over the past year, with many returning back to pre-COVID issuing levels, and as has PC use and activities. So from September of this year, we have been able to have sort of the knit and natter groups, the coffee mornings return back at many of our sites, which again has just shown the importance of these services within our very rural communities. We have got 10 of our 34 hubs operating at pre-COVID hours, as many did need to reduce the hours that they were available to ensure that they'd got volunteer availability to be able to offer the services. And we have had an increase in the number of new users, so new members signing up out our community hub. So again, just emphasising the use that we've got across all of the services. I think that's a fair summary of the report. Thank you, Chair. I'm quite happy to take any comments from the scrutiny members.
Okay, thank you, Louise. Councillor Mrs Clark. Councillor Mrs Clark, yeah. You're next, Councillor Brockway.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. I'm interested to know if you could just give me an update, please, on what's happened to the Ermine hub. That's the hub closest to my division, which is St Giles, and looking at the demographics, which I was checking yesterday, the people that it would serve between Ermine and the St Giles division, if you were looking at all age groups from birth to the oldest, is just over 20,000. Now, people in St Giles won't be able to access that, they'd have to walk, and I was wondering as well if there's any opportunity, as things are doing so well, if there's any opportunity to organise another hub, maybe in the St Giles division. But primarily I'd like to know what's going on with the Ermine hub, and if the others are doing so well, what's happened to the Ermine one. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Clark. Louise, are you able to answer that for us, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So in 2017, we had an organisation called Learning Communities who operated the Ermine Community Hub on our behalf. Unfortunately, in the summer of 2017, they went into liquidation and administration, so they pulled out of delivering the service at the Ermine Community Hub site. Rather than see the site close and have no provision in that area for the many individuals that you've just highlighted there, Councillor, we did ask GLL to be able to take on operation of the service, which they did continue to do up until March 2020, when all sites had to close as a result of the COVID pandemic. What's happened since then is that we've been in discussions with another provider, with Bishop Grot University, for them to be able to take over the Ermine Community Hub. And between myself as the library service and also property colleagues, we are meeting with Bishop Grot representatives on Monday of next week to be able to go through the details of the lease agreements and heads of terms, to be able to get all of the contractual paperwork out of the way and aligned, to then be able to hand over the keys for that community hub to the Bishop Grot University for them to be able to deliver that service on our behalf. So the hub is going to reopen. We are still fully committed to being able to support that. It's just unfortunately because of the COVID pandemic we had to close it, and as a result GLL staff and colleagues were then redeployed within some of the other core sites of which they are commissioned to deliver, because they needed additional staffing to ensure that they had bubbles of staff being able to operate those sites, which unfortunately meant they couldn't continue to deliver the Ermine Community Hub on that lower level hours provision, but coincided with the fact that we were already discussing with the other provider about them taking it over. We thought we'd wait until we'd got to the position of being able to give the new provider the keys, and that they will be able to open that site to run as a true community hub and library in the coming weeks and months. It will just be a case of finalising the details of the paperwork from that perspective. And in regards to your second comment, we had the approval to be able to open 40 community hubs across the county. We are operating at 36. So there's 34 physical hubs across the county, and then we've also got provision in the hospitals at Lincoln and also at Grenfell, which are classed as hubs as well in terms of physical numbers from a contractual perspective. So we have got space for 4 more community hubs to come on board. So if there are individuals in the St Giles area that want to be able to take that on and we can work with them in identifying a suitable premises, then that is something that we can explore.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's really helpful. And as the County Councillor for St Giles Division, could I ask that I be kept informed of any progress in that area? And also, can I also highlight that there are buildings within St Giles Division that would be able to accommodate the use of a hub? I'm sure of that, if there was some negotiation able to take place. But yes, the Bishop Grot is probably for St Giles Division a better location. But for those who are on Ermine West and maybe on the further parts of Ermine East, that's moving it a little bit further away from them. So I would have concerns for my colleague, Councillor Lee, on that, and also for the people who live in the neighbouring area. But thank you for that. But I would like to be kept abreast of all of those developments, please. And yes, I would like to put forward that St Giles Division is properly considered for some hub support. Thank you.
If I may, Chair, just to comment, the Ermine Community Hub itself will remain where it currently is. It's just that it's the Bishop Grot University that are taking responsibility for that site to be able to ensure that it's open and operated through volunteers. So the Ermine Hub itself isn't moving. It's just the Bishop Grot University are going to be the ones that are responsible for the site. But I will make contact with you in regards to the St Giles area and potentials there.
Okay, thank you. I now have a number of speakers in council. Yeah, I have a number of speakers. I note that Councillor Corey wishes to come in as Executive Councillor. It may be pertinent to this question and answer, so I'm going to bring Councillor Corey in then, followed by Councillor Mr Clark.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I wanted to just thank our officers and our colleagues at GLL for the way they continue to offer our library services, and especially our hubs. When the new model was established in 2016, I know this is a well-worn trope now. No one could have envisaged that we would be facing this deadly pandemic, and as we see in the paper and as evidenced in Bracebridge Heath in particular, in spite of the pandemic, the community hub model does indeed go from strength to strength. There were some concerns when the model was first established, but they've become a genuine focus for community activity outside of book lending and online access. They provide community opportunities for addressing social isolation, for skills training, and I'm sure that the model will continue to offer essential library services and social benefits to our communities. And I just wanted to thank Louise in particular, and also Councillor Lee, for the work they did in bringing Bishop Grot's test into the hub model, so we can have library services at that end of Lincoln. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Corey. I have Councillor Mr Clark, followed by Councillor Brockway. Not forgotten.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a couple of questions, if we could do sort of one at a time so I don't bombard you with a load of questions in one go. Going forward, obviously these facilities are available. Would any of the other county council departments use them as a face-to-face with members of the public?
Over to you, Louise.
Yes, so we do have strong connections with many of the other departments within Lincolnshire County Council itself, and also with other public bodies, including the police and the NHS, which use the sites for drop-in centres. And I think that's something that we're going to be exploring even more so following the COVID pandemic, to ensure that these are community hubs for the local residents, and ensuring that we can be that connection point between some other services to ensure that those drop-ins are there that can meet the needs of each of those communities. So yes, we already do it, but it's a firm commitment that we're wanting to expand that moving forward.
Thank you for that. And I was pleased to hear that you said that the various, or not all, but most are using the premises to help people living in isolation who can come along and maybe meet others and have a cup of coffee. It was also good to read that how popular they are in view of the problems we've had with COVID and things are picking up. Should we consider asking either the comms team to put something in the county magazine to promote the hubs, or possibly invite Look North to do a report and highlight what the hubs can do and encourage more people to use it? Thank you.
Okay, Louise, do you want to come back on that one?
Yeah, just to say, we do periodically use all of our media channels and the magazines that go out to all of our residents across the county to be able to highlight the ongoing strengths of the community hub model. And in particular, we pick out case studies probably once a year or every 18 months to be able to show the strengths and the developments of those sites. And including their opening hours that are available. I think we've probably dropped off that for the last 18 months, given how long the sites have been closed as a result of the volunteers being unable to continue that. But it's certainly something that we can pick up again with our communications team and see if some further promotion can be done, highlighting the good work that the community hubs are doing.
Thank you very much indeed for that.
Okay, thank you. So we've got Councillor Brockway, followed by Councillor Lee, followed by Councillor Sneath. So over to you, Councillor Brockway.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Mine's a slightly awkward question, actually. One of the community hubs in my area is absolutely hugely successful, and that's largely because of the massive support that's been put forward by this council, for which I'd like to say thank you. I mean, really, really hugely successful. It's turned into something much bigger than one could have ever hoped. However, I've got a series of letters and emails from very disturbed residents who live nearby and whose lives are being constantly disrupted by noise, by dogs, by a community hub that is essentially in a quiet residential area. Partly, and it's only partly in this because it fronts onto a more major road as well. But these residents are becoming distressed, they're writing letters, they're going to West Lindsay asking about planning, and, you know, is the hub allowed to do this? It's not curmudgeonly or NIMBY. There's so much disturbance in their gardens, for instance. They've lost the quiet into which they bought into a very old area. And I'm not sure what we do in a circumstance like that. One doesn't want to damage the huge success and enjoyment of the hub, but, you know, one wonders also, is there a point at which we have to say, actually, let's look at this within the context of the neighbourhood? And if so, is there anybody I can engage with over that, please? Because it's getting hotter and hotter, this particular topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Louise?
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Councillor Brockway. I think I probably am aware of the site that you are mentioning, and we are in constant communications with our property team and our strategic property team to be able to identify those issues and find a resolution for it. So I think what's probably best is if I can continue those discussions with them and discuss with you outside of the meeting for that one particular area. But we do have good communications with all of the community hubs, and we've got the library development officers within GLL who have very strong relationships with each of the sites. And part of the process of setting up a community hub is that they go through a business application pack to be able to identify what it is that they want to be able to use that site for and all of the other permitted uses of it. So we do take consideration into account at the very start of the community hub model when they were first established about the area that they are working within and the needs of those residents within that local area. So I think it's something that we do and that we can continue to do through the library development officers of reminding those community hubs about the wider impacts that they're having within their environment. But I will pick up that specific hub with yourselves and property outside of the meeting, if I may.
Oh, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Patiently waiting, Councillor Lee.
Thanks. I wasn't trying to jump in. I didn't know if you'd seen me. Hi, Louise. I think we've corresponded quite a bit about the Ermine Hub and the library facility and that. I only started representing this area last May, so I don't know every last bit of the history. And I actually live on the Ermine East. I only moved there just over 2 years ago. But I am really active in the community, and that's not for a political reason, it's just how I am. I volunteer at the food bank, I help with a lunch club once a month, go to the food bank every week, and there's a free food Friday thing where it's like an out-of-school club where people get pizza or hot dogs or whatever as well, and I help get some of the funding of that. So I'm a very active community councillor, and I'd like to request, please, if I can attend your meeting next week, if I'm able to round work, because after all, I've been elected by the community to represent them, and I wouldn't be butting in and telling people what to do. I mean, even just to sit and listen and hear what's going on, because I see people so regularly and get asked about this. I'd very, very much like to be at that meeting, if that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Louise.
Yeah, I think that's something that we can organise for you, Councillor Lee, not a problem.
Have you any idea what day it is? Because the only day I'm working next week is Wednesday in the week.
It's Monday morning. I'll send you the invite over.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sneath.
Thank you, Chairman. Actually, a lot of what I was going to say, which is mostly complimentary, no, it's all complimentary about this service, it has been said. But in Pinchbeck, where I live and my division, ours is run from the old school, and it's absolutely become the shining star for community in our villages. It is wonderful, and I won't say any more because of time, but it's been such an amazing project, and it's lovely to meet you, Louise. I'm sure I'll be in touch with you about something now I know about you, but it's really wonderful. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Very complimentary. Louise, do you want to come back on that one?
Just to echo what Councillor Sneath has just said there, and in particular with that hub, we have just had a discussion with our NHS colleagues to be able to use it as a site for one of the booster clinics, so for the COVID booster injections. It's a big site, and we've got the ability to be able to use part of those rooms to help with kind of the ongoing pandemic and ensuring that our local residents are getting boosted. So again, just to highlight how some of these hubs are used within the community alongside the library provision.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Danny, followed by Councillor Key. Councillor Danny.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a kind of remark, or it's a question probably. It's just the situation of the public transport at the moment is cutting off a lot of people from my community. Now, the timing, the lack of buses, it makes people feel isolated a bit because they cannot travel at certain times and they have to go by certain times back. So if I give an example, I mean, Tattershire Road, there is no buses after 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. People, they would like to come to have a coffee, talk to friends or go to the church, but they cannot. And I think it's quite worrying at the moment because some people are really isolated completely. If we cannot provide them with adequate transport to bring them into town and give them that little bit of freedom so they can socialize with other people, it may affect their mental well-being. And as I said, I'm a bit worried about my constituent. Is there any answer to that, please, Louise? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So, Louise, can you sort the bus routes out for us, please?
I'm not entirely sure that's within my area of expertise, but I think what I can comment on is that that's part of the reason and the rationale for the community hub model, Councillor Danny, in terms of trying to make things more accessible on a local level. And as part of the restructuring of the library service back in 2016, we did look at bus routes to be able to make sure that everyone could either access a core site in one of the main towns or one of the smaller community hubs that's within the area. And we do also have a lot of online provision, again, to be able to help with that interaction with our residents that are a bit further afield to ensure that they aren't socially isolated.
Good, thank you very much, Lewis. It's not, Mr. Chairman, I'm not asking Lewis to sort out our transport, but it's just a kind of a comment and an information point for us all to know that there is people who are suffering because of certain things. But thank you very much, Lewis. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Danny, and noted. Thank you. So, Councillor Key.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Louise, I think you mentioned that there was room for 4 more community hubs. I just wondered, I'm a new councillor like Councillor Lee. I've only been here since May. And I wonder how a community might go about becoming a community hub, and whether you have rules on how far they have to be from another one. I'm thinking of my division because it covers a lot of villages over a wide area, and there's one hub in there. But if you could perhaps just give me a bit of an idea how we go about starting to apply for a new one, or just to get going, really. Thank you.
Over to you, Louise.
Yep, so we do have a little pack of information that was established when we first started creating the community hub model, and that is the same principles that we would continue using for any future hub that may come online. So I can share the application pack with you as a starting point, and I'm happy to have a conversation further outside of that in terms of being able to look at criteria to be able to see if we can set up another hub within your area.
Yes, thank you. That would be really helpful if you could send me that. And the parish that I have in mind, I can obviously bring it up at their parish council meeting. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Louise, I noticed that return to using computers has been slow, with some sites having very little uptake. People are still quite reticent about being in enclosed spaces and spending less time in the library. I consider various reasons for that. Could it also be that people have actually purchased their own PC and e-books and whatever during COVID when those cut off? Could that be one of the reasons too?
Potentially, yes, Chair. I think we've seen a bit of a trend of late throughout all of this last 18 months where customers are starting to return back to library sites, but in the morning, because when they were only allowed their 1 hour exercise, a lot of people were using that hour to come out, go to the library service and then run their other errands and go back to the safety and security of their own home. So there are a couple of trends that we've noticed from a library perspective, and what we're doing is just monitoring that moving over the next couple of months to see if there's any further tweaks and changes that we can do across all of the library service. And in particular with the PC use, again, it's just about promotion and publicising the additional measures and the safety measures that all of our sites are still continuing to adhere to make those customers feel more comfortable, trusted and reassured within our sites.
Okay, thank you, Louise. Just one more from me. I know at the early stages of the pandemic, Books was quarantined for, I think I'm right in saying, 72 hours. Is that process still in operation? And what other methods have we got there for sanitisation at community hubs and libraries, please?
Yep, thank you, Chair. So we no longer are required to quarantine any of the items anymore. That guidance has changed, so we no longer are restricted within how long books need to be remaining in the back office before they can be shared with customers again. However, we do still ensure that there's sanitising points at every entrance and exit, and the RFID self-serve kiosks and at the printers and at the computers that customers can use. We've still got signs up being able to encourage our users, if they want to continue wearing masks, then that's something that we're comfortable with. And in terms of things like the study spaces and casual seating areas, we've made sure that they are still a reasonable distance from each other, and where customers potentially do need to share a same space, we're ensuring that the chairs are next to each other rather than being opposite to, again, reduce the kind of face-on transactions that we've got. And we've continued to have all of the Perspex screens at all of our sites, both community hubs and core libraries.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stokes, have we anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, no one online. Okay, so the actions for this committee is we're invited to consider and comment on the information included in the report, and highlight any additional priorities for consideration. I take it everything's been jotted down. That's been quite an interesting topic. So the proposal is that I move that the committee receives this report and that our comments in terms of priorities are recorded and to be taken into consideration. Okay, can you please raise your hand if you agree? Okay, everyone in the chamber agrees. So thank you for that, Louise. Very interesting. Move on to Item 7, Integrated Risk Management Plan 2020 to 2024, the yearly update. This item is on pages 27 to 54 of this agenda pack and considers an update on progress against the Integrated Risk Management Plan 2020 to 2024, which began in April 2021. The report will be presented by Mark Baxter, Chief Fire Officer. So over to you, Mark. Or is it Ryan? Over to you, Ryan.
Yeah, good afternoon, Councillor. Yeah, you've got myself today. My name is Ryan Stacey. I'm the Assistant Chief Fire Officer for Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue Service. As you heard in the introduction, we have a requirement under law to produce an integrated risk management plan, and that considers how we will respond to the risk that the community faces from fire and the risk of other emergencies. And it also seeks to balance that with the things that we need to do as an organisation to continue to provide an efficient and effective service. So as highlighted, our integrated risk management plan came to the executive this time last year in November 2020. We began working to it in April 2020, and it consists of 4 frameworks. And it's a new way that we've structured our integrated risk management plan moving forwards. We've also realigned some of our performance scrutiny arrangements. So we scrutinise the performance of our integrated risk management plan through our performance board. It considers strategic performance and makes sure that we are satisfying our statutory functions and that we're delivering against the ambitions and the objectives set out in our annual plan, which is our yearly breakdown of our 4-yearly integrated risk management plan. The next scrutiny arrangement is around our programme board. Our programme board is where we manage and monitor our high risk, high value, high complexity projects. Some of the projects we've got ongoing at the minute are our technical response unit, which went to executive last time, where we got agreement to procure some new technical response units. We also have some emergency communications equipment in our fire control room to help mobilise our fire engines. We also need to replace some of our station end equipment in 18 months, 2 years time. So the planning has begun for that. Clearly, there's high complexity and high risk involved in those projects. Over the last 12 months, we've delivered projects around the flood pumps. There's been some publicity around that recently, and that changes some of the ways that we respond to flood risk in the county of Lincolnshire, making much better use of our resources and working in partnership with Lincolnshire County Council. And we also delivered some mobile data terminals, which provide a technological ability to provide high risk information to our firefighters at the scene of an incident, to provide them information that may help them resolve an operational incident. What we'd like to do from July, which will be at the end year point of our integrated risk management plan, where we'll have a complete year of data and we'll have delivered a full year's integrated risk management plan, is bring back to you some assurance around our ability to undertake some of those statutory functions, and also be able to give you an update on the things that we've delivered through our programme board. In this report, we have provided on page 30 some examples of the sort of data which is analysed and scrutinised at our performance board level meetings within the organisation. That's attended by a representative of the Executive Councillor. It would be useful to perhaps bring some of that data in a bit more detail through to this meeting, either periodically through the year or certainly in the July meeting, and certainly we'd be interested in comment from this meeting as to whether or not they'd be prepared to receive that information. The sorts of breakdowns of data that we use contribute to some of those strategic performance measures. So clearly one of the things that we want to do is make sure that we can get a fire engine to the scene of an incident as quickly as we possibly can. So therefore there's a number of things that contribute to that, one of which is making sure that our on-call crews who do fire and rescue duties on a part-time basis are available all the time. So clearly we scrutinise that. We also scrutinise the location of our fire engines, our community safety activities, etc., etc. So while the data that you will get currently at the Public Protection and Community Scrutiny meeting is the very high level strategic information. What we'd like to do is provide you with some assurance and some probably greater detail around the level at which we scrutinise some of those figures. I know a picture paints 1,000 words. And I know I'm committed to provide some more up-to-date information at this meeting. Now Q2 data is available. Some of it is quite wordy, so I will provide just one snippet and then perhaps have an opportunity of circulating the data outside of the meeting, because I think some of it takes a bit of getting to grips with. One of the areas that we look at, a performance indicator, is the number of accidental dwelling fires that were confined to the room of origin. Clearly what this tells us is that we're in effect getting to the scene of a fire before that fire becomes larger than it needs to be. So in the last quarter, we had 149 accidental dwelling fires. 133 of those were confined to the room of origin. So that leaves 16 that spread beyond the room of origin. Now, there's clearly a number of reasons that could have happened, but what we do within the organisation is scrutinise those 16 to see if there's something that we could have done better to ensure that those 16 incidents did not spread beyond the room of origin. That to provide you with an understanding of some of that narrative, of the 16 incidents that spread beyond the room of origin, 9 of them had a working smoke alarm that activated. 2 had a working smoke alarm, but it did not activate because the fire was not close enough to the detector, leaving 5 that either had no smoke alarm or did not have a working smoke alarm at the time of the fire. Only 3 of the 16 were still confined to the room of origin on our arrival, and we achieved our attendance standard for the first appliance on 14 of the 16 occasions and 15 of the 16 occasions for the second pump that was in attendance. That's the second fire engine that arrived on scene. There currently remains no trends in the data in terms of ignition sources or causes where a fire has started, and there's no trend in terms of the times of day. So that's the sort of detail that we will go into to understand whether the service that we are setting out to achieve is providing the end result, which ultimately is a reduction in deaths and injuries. Clearly, we get, fortunately, a few number of deaths and injuries within the county, so we start to look at a more granular detail behind that. Another area we look at is the percentage of dwelling fires where a smoke alarm had activated, or indeed where a smoke alarm had been fitted at all, and that helps us understand some of our community safety activity and whether or not what we're doing in terms of trying to get smoke alarms into every high risk premises within the county is indeed fit for purpose and working. Our proposal is that we continue to work with the Executive Councillor to develop performance measures, and we perhaps submit an improved suite of indicators that can come regularly to this meeting at a performance level. And in July, we will bring a much detailed version that can be scrutinised by this group. I'm more than happy to take any comments or questions on the way that we manage the performance of the organisation, and certainly be happy to work with councillors moving forward to develop a suite of indicators which will be useful for them to scrutinise the performance of Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue.
Okay, thank you for that, Ryan. Councillor Corey.
Thank you, Chairman. And again, I want to start by thanking our officers and our firefighters for the way they continue to respond to the ongoing pandemic situation, while the rest of us can work from home and attend meetings remotely. Frontline firefighters can't do that, and the ongoing pandemic continues to have some impact on our availability, both on emergency call-outs and on our proactive work. So we continue to monitor and respond to changing demographics and technical challenges, which is why we recently made the decision to redeploy our technical equipment around the council, around the county, to areas where it had higher usage and where the risk had been demonstrated to be greater. And I just wanted to highlight to people, in case you've missed it over the past couple of weeks, due to the changing weather patterns, we've invested in a further 2 high volume flood pumps. We did some media around it, but you may have missed it. So this means that we can deploy those flood pumps. We need fewer staff, they can pump more water, and we can keep fire appliances on the run so they can respond to our statutory duties. So I just wanted to let you know that while responding to flooding isn't a statutory duty, we want to make sure that our service responds to risk that our communities are experiencing, and we want to be there for them. So thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to ask some questions about this, and please understand that any questions that I ask are not a criticism. They are genuine questions. Okay.
Thank you.
I looked at the beginning about flood risk. Really pleased to see that you've bought some more equipment, and noticed the comments about the cost pressure on certain kinds of equipment. So I wondered if resourcing is an issue there, because my understanding has always been that the fire service is not resourced to deal with floods. They do it because it's an emergency, but they're not specifically resourced. I have to say as well, after yesterday's vote in the Commons, I'd be a bit concerned about any effluent running around in what you're pumping off, but that's another issue. Secondly, I note that you're behind target on home safety and wellbeing assessments, and should we be concerned about that? Again, it's not a criticism, but I wondered if that was a resource or a capacity issue, why that was, because it said that the 5-day target was missed it's almost a quarter of the time. So I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about that. RTC targets, I'm really embarrassed to say I don't know what RTC stands for. Again, that was behind target.
I'll help you out on that one. Road traffic collisions.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
You see,
Used to be known as RTAs, road traffic
yeah,
accidents.
yeah,
road traffic
I did wonder about that. Yeah. And as I say, it truly isn't a criticism, but I think if the resources or whether that's in terms of money or people isn't there, then I'd just like to know that. And just pleased really that the building regs applications, they've almost met those, which is good, especially when you think about Grenfell, because those kind of fires, we've got those buildings all over the country. It's not just in London. So pleased that that one was met. But thank you. Thank you very much. Just my question.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lee. A number of comments there, Ryan, if you could come back to us on those.
Yeah, I think I'll try to take them in order. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Flooding, it's not a statutory responsibility, as Councillor Corey outlined. It is something we do because we do have a resource. With flooding often comes a humanitarian risk or indeed a life risk. So we do what we can in those areas in order to provide a service to the community that meets their needs. In terms of broader, do we have resource? I think we probably do have sufficient resource. It's about making sure the resource is in the right place at the right time, and clearly as a fire and rescue service that relies extremely heavily on on-call firefighters. These are firefighters with a day job, and they respond to a pager when there's a fire and need to be able to respond to the fire station within 5 minutes to then be able to attend an incident. So it does provide us with some challenges because it is a pretty unique frontline delivery model, not unique to the fire and rescue service, but unique in terms of the way we operate our business compared to some other areas of local authorities. But yeah, a perennial issue. We do take make some decisions about how we utilise that resource, how we staff some of our fire engines. So a good example is we have a number of fire engines which we call part of our assured level of response. So these are fire stations which contribute disproportionately to our attendance standards. So we seek to be able to attend incidents within a certain time frame. Some of those fire stations that are on call have a bigger impact on our ability to deliver that time than others. So clearly we make bigger efforts in terms of backfilling those stations in terms of resource. So if we do have spare capacity, we can put people on those stations to bring we call it ridership, so the crewing level on that fire engine up to a level where it has an ability to deploy to the incident. You talked about the 5-day target for community safety visits. So less of a concern than it perhaps looks. So this is our ability to attend high risk and critical residents, provide them with an intervention in terms of smoke alarms, advice, etc. within 5 days. In some respects, we're a victim of the target. The target's there with the best of intentions to make sure we can get out and see vulnerable people as quickly as possible. There are all sorts of reasons why we miss that, and you're right, we missed that on nearly a quarter of occasions, and that's not for want of contacting those people. A lot of these referrals come in from our partners within Lincolnshire County Council and further afield through East Midlands Ambulance Service, etc. We make contact with those individuals, and often they are receiving other care, so sometimes they have been hospitalised, so they're not actually at home to receive a home fire safety check, or indeed they would like to have someone with them when they avail themselves of that opportunity. Clearly, a number of the people that we contact, we are going out to see them because they suffer from dementia. Now, of course, with the complexities of a vulnerable person with dementia, it's much better if they have a carer or a member of the family with them when we go and undertake the visit, so that actually we can educate the whole family as opposed to just one individual with extremely complex needs. So there are, and we do scrutinise the reasons that we don't meet that 5-day target, and we're comfortable that the reason we don't meet it is not because we haven't got a resourcing issue. It's more because the people aren't available to undertake the visit in itself. RTCs, I think you covered in terms of the acronym. Yeah, again, lots of complexities around our inability to make the standard with our RTCs, which is why, as you'll see in the report, that we undertake quite a lot of scrutiny around the reasons that we either are or aren't meeting that target. We break them down into reasons that we have some control over and reasons that we don't. The reasons that we have some control over, we can clearly undertake some management action. So if the appliance is defective, then clearly there's something we can do about making sure appliances aren't defected or servicing contracts are adhered to, etc. If we don't meet it because the crew is not available, then we can look at whether or not it's one of the stations that should have been available and reasons why that was or wasn't the case. There are then some areas which we would consider to be beyond our control, but we will still do an awful lot around it. So RTCs, road traffic collisions, is a great example of what we would define as a non-addressable location. So we end up getting a call to a road traffic collision somewhere along the A52 between village X or village Y, and often that can be wildly inaccurate. So of course our control operators need to mobilise I think it's unfair to say belt and braces resource, but certainly they need to use their judgment to ensure that the right number of fire appliances are mobilised to that incident to ensure that we can provide the right attendance standard. You may have heard of an app called What 3 Words. What 3 Words breaks the entire globe down into 5 metre squares and then provides 3 words which locate that one square. So the more people we can have with that app on their phone, and it's actually downloaded onto all county council devices, that will give our control operators within 5 metres exactly where that incident is. We use it through all the emergency services to great effect, and we regularly run publicity campaigns. So that's a good example of how, due to trying to find the exact location of an incident, we can be outside of our attendance standards, and something that we do about that. So hopefully that answers that question.
Can I just come back? It doesn't.
Yeah,
That's a really full answer. Thank you so much. Just 2 things really. First of all, I wondered, and it seems an obvious thing to us, if the rurality of Lincolnshire impacts on the delivery of your fire service, because obviously if it's more spread out, I would imagine it's more difficult and time consuming to get to fires. And the second thing, I was at Adult Scrutiny recently and Councillor Key was with me, and we talked about having a visit to certain facilities around a report that we'd read. I'd be really, really interested from a personal perspective to visit, I mean, I've done it before when I was in London, a control room or wherever would be appropriate, because I'd love to know more about the delivery of the fire service in Lincolnshire and try and drill down on some of the specifics of it. It really does interest me. And I'm sure there are other people as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ryan.
Certainly be happy to facilitate a visit. More than happy to raise awareness of the function that we undertake, and certainly again some of the challenges in our control room. We are co-located with the police, which provides us with certain benefit around some of those multi-agency incidents, but certainly we can cover that. In terms of the rurality of Lincolnshire, yes, it does present problems. The road network in Lincolnshire is the road network in Lincolnshire. We're not dissimilar to other rural fire and rescue services, and we will often scrutinise our performance against other predominantly rural fire and rescue services. So we make sure that in terms of that benchmarking exercise, we're always we're always comparing apples with apples. We will continue to do that. That's probably an element that we'd like to bring back to Scrutiny to provide you with that assurance that we are performing in a like manner with our peers, and I think that will help provide you with some context to adequately scrutinise our performance. So we'll certainly do that. The bottom line is the rurality of Lincolnshire is a fact, and therefore we need to resource our fire and rescue service to ensure it copes with the rurality of Lincolnshire. So it's not without its challenges, but it is something that we do address.
Thanks. Can I just liaise? Will the chair arrange that? You know, because I'm sure there'll be other people that might want to have a visit too, or Kira. Thank you. Thank you.
Just to provide some assurance, we're already working towards identifying some dates so we can do some visits at Waddington Station, possibly combine it with visits at the County Emergency Centre as well. So it's already underway. Thank you. It will be in 2022, however.
Yeah, thank you. There's no rush. I just think there's nothing like getting out on the ground and
exactly.
seeing it for yourself.
Sure. Councillor Mr Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a number of questions, if I could give them to the Chief Fire Officer one at a time. The flood pumps, I think it's a brilliant addition and asset for you to use. But looking forward, obviously, prevention of flooding is probably a way of solving some problems. Have you identified areas where there is regular flooding, and is it something going forward that the county should work with other partners to maybe reinforce riverbanks, arrange for dredging of becks or rivers to give a greater capacity, which maybe help with any flooding issues?
The simple answer is yes, we do understand where those flooding risks tend to be, communities tend to be more at risk, and yes, we do work with our partners within the wider LCC to ensure where there is responsibility to do that, or indeed where we can source community self-help programmes. We do all of that. So yes, that is something that we do regularly engage in. Okay. Under your various objectives, is this something that you self-review, or do you ever have an outside body to come in and give you any pointers? So we manage and monitor the performance for ourselves. Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabularies and Fire and Rescue Services do have a national inspection role. They came out and inspected us in May, June time of this year. They'll be publishing a report in early December, and that does look at two things. It looks at the way that we developed our integrated risk management plan, so the data sets we used in terms of identifying the most vulnerable people in the community. It looks at how we consulted with those members of the community, both in the development of the integrated risk management plan and then upon delivery of the integrated risk management plan. And then it looks at how we deliver our service against how we said we would deliver our service. So hopefully that provides some assurance. Right, thank you for that. I'm sort of new as a councillor. Does the Fire and Rescue undertake any desktop exercises, either in its own isolation or with partners? Yes, absolutely. So we undertake both desktop and live exercising. We have a target that everyone in the organisation will be involved in that. So we run local exercises at a station level. We run divisional exercises, which will run up to 8 or 10 pumps, and then we run service-wide exercises. The most recent of those was an exercise called Silver Siren, which took place at our Waddington Training Centre, and that involved the Royal Air Force, it involved other forces, bodies, National Search and Rescue Teams, the Fire and Rescue Service, East Midlands Ambulance, local authorities, and it's one of the biggest exercises that was run for local resilience forums across the country. So a very impressive exercise, a lot of learning that we get and our partners get. And then we push that learning to a national level. But yeah, in answer to your question, we train inter and intra-operability. So we train with other cross-border fire and rescue services to make sure that the services that we can provide just as seamlessly when there's fire appliances from either Humberside, Nottinghamshire, Cambridgeshire, Leicestershire, etc. attending, and then interoperability to make sure we can work with either other emergency service responders, the military, and indeed the third sector and the voluntary sector. So yeah, we do those both on a desktop basis, but also in the live arena.
Right, thank you. That was very interesting to hear. I didn't actually, or wasn't aware of the Waddington exercise. Do you ever invite along the media to publicise the fact that you're doing this service so that you can provide a better service for the public?
It's often posted through our social media channels. Exercise Silver Siren, I think, attracted some media attention as well. Clearly, one of the things we always want to do is engage with local communities so as we don't alarm them in any way. Clearly, a lot of our exercises involve large amounts of cosmetic smoke. We had one in Boston fairly recently at the Boston Stump, and clearly people would rather know in advance that their heritage sites aren't burning to the ground and it's only cosmetic smoke. So yeah, we do try to engage with local communities, and we do engage with the media where appropriate.
Thank you for that. In part of the report, you mentioned about engaging with employees. Is this done on a completely ad hoc basis, or have you got a specific timeline that you can get involved with your staff?
We do both. So we have a programmed round of engagement activities. So clearly the pandemic, we learned a lot of lessons, and one of those is that given the rurality of Lincolnshire, it's sometimes easier for everyone concerned if we run some of those engagement sessions over platforms like Microsoft Teams or Zoom. So we meet with, as a senior management team, we meet with staff on a completely non-agendaed meeting once every 6 months. So we run 3 or 4 sessions for people to be able to drop in, ask questions, us to be able to provide an update. We also have a station inspection program or a station visit program that runs in 2 parts. There's one which is a station assurance parts where we go out and make sure that stations are running as we would expect them to run. And the other half of that is a visit from the senior management team to go out and engage with staff. And that is attended by both Councillor Morn and Councillor Corey in their executive role. So there is representative from the executive as well.
Okay, thank you. And sort of my last question, there seems to be a considerable strength and commitment, the way you cover the physical threats and the maintenance of your vehicles and equipment. But I didn't see anywhere, maybe I missed it, about recruiting staff, apprenticeships, succession planning, or even the demographics of your staff, so that you can maintain the correct input as there is an output.
It's certainly something we do monitor at a lower level in the organisation. So we've just recently run a recruitment campaign, for example. So we will monitor the diversity of the applicants through the process to appointment. We also look at succession and turnover. Clearly, one of the problems that the UK Fire and Rescue Service has is keeping hold of part-time staff. So it's the on-call staff. We have a large turnover in that area. So we often look at, on a continual basis, the number of people that join, the number of people that stay with us, and of course retirement at the end of people's careers, and the sorts of skills that we're likely to lose. So we do that. We have targets in terms of attraction, retention, and succession planning in terms of skills and abilities, and making sure that we monitor those right the way across the piece. It's perhaps something that we do need to make a little bit clearer in our strategic documents, and it's something that we can certainly bring to this group so they have some oversight of it.
And as part of those comments, ethnicity, have we got any stats that could be put to say that we are trying to recruit from that particular group? Over.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do monitor that both in terms of ethnicity and gender. We monitor that on a regular basis. I mean, to give you a flavour of it, I haven't got the figures exactly to hand, but our gender balance for our non-operational staff, so our non-uniformed, non-firefighting roles, is pretty balanced. We struggle, and so does the sector, in terms of the recruitment of women and minority groups right the way across the sector. Currently, we sit at about 6%, which of women in operational roles across the organisation, which, believe it or not, is above the national average. The national average sits at about 5.6%, but that is something that we do monitor. We do undertake a lot of events to try to demonstrate to women and certainly young girls that a career in the fire service is not a an exclusively masculine role.
Right, thank you much indeed for all those replies, and thank you and your crews for your splendid work.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Key next, followed by Councillor Brockway.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think most of mine's been answered because I was asking about the number of times you can't get to an accident in time because of the incorrect address and not being able to find places. You mentioned the what three words, and you did also say that I think you do publicity around that. I think it probably would be really important to actually stress how many times it's not possible to get there quickly because of incorrect addresses and difficulty in finding accidents. And maybe that could be something that could be looked at for future publicity, and how easy it perhaps is to download that app. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just come in there because I know that down south at Crowland, talking about incorrect addresses, you'd very often get a call to say fire on the A16 at Crowland, yeah? Well, the fire station is on the A16, and there'd be a certain amount of time just sitting on the forecourt, didn't know whether to turn left or turn right, because you could be going in a totally wrong direction. So if that could be improved upon, correct addresses by any means, that would be good news. But over to you, Ryan. The question was asked to you.
Yeah, absolutely. We did a lot of publicity of what three words during the summer with partners. The crux of things there was people getting in distress on the seafront. And we have a number of instances that we will attend with our boat crews and indeed RNLI, etc., around the coasts. We do periodic publicity of those campaigns. It is a critical app that we do use, and clearly we would urge people to install that app. We had a member of our own staff who came across a gentleman in medical distress a couple of months ago, and was able to use what three words while he was in sand dunes out on the east coast to direct the air ambulance to be able to actually undertake some life-saving care. So that individual made a full recovery, largely as a result not only of our staff member who was able to undertake CPR, but also as a result of what three words being able to get the timely attendance of the air ambulance. So that individual was able to get to hospital very quickly and under some proper primary medical care.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brockway.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you ever so much for this report. It's very, very interesting, and thank you also for the huge amount of work that you're doing to keep the community safe. I have a question about smoke alarms, and I also have a question about page 31, which I wonder if I could start there, please. It's just simply some things I don't quite understand. On page 31, you have the reason for not meeting targets. And if I could just ask you about a couple of them. It says appliance unavailable OFRN. I don't know what that is. Delayed booking mobile. I don't know what that is. And then further down, it talks about edge of Polygon. I don't know what that is. Could you just explain those to me, please, before I ask about smoke alarms? Thank you.
So I'll take the OFRN, which is off the run, but I'll
Sorry?
leave the off the run, but I'll leave the rest to Ryan. Over to you, Ryan.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor. No, this, for the purposes of this report, this has been taken from an internal document, and I think some of the learning moving forwards is when we present this to this group in future, we will absolutely remove a lot of those acronyms that mean an awful lot to us, but won't mean an awful lot to the public. There's a couple of others in there, IST or restricted crew on the line above. IST is our incident support team, so that's when we have we would mobilise a minimum, absolute minimum of a crew of 4 to an operational incident. There are occasions where if the crew is not going to be the first pump in attendance, we can mobilise a crew of 3. So that's an example of where we would use a crew of 3, which doesn't meet the minimum requirement, but can play a really active and valuable role at an incident that already has other resources going to it. So that's IST. Off the run, we've covered the edge of delayed booking mobile. So that literally means it'll be a crew that have, so booking mobile is when an appliance leaves the station, it will declare itself to be on its way to the incident with our fire control room. So our fire control room know not to deploy another resource They know that someone is going to the incident, so they won't be backing them up with further resources. The reason that an appliance could be delayed booking mobile, certainly our hold time and on-call stations, if they're undertaking training on station, it could be that, for example, if they've been doing some ladder training, if they've been pitching ladders in our drill yard against the training building, or indeed if they've been using boats, etc., there is a delay in the time it takes to make that equipment up, put it back on the fire engine, and then deploy to an incident. So there are occasions where pumps can be delayed booking mobile. The other one you're asking was edge of Polygon. Yeah, it's something that means an awful lot to us, but probably doesn't mean an awful lot to anyone else. So the way that we split the county up is into polygons, so a lot of different shapes, based on lower super output areas, which are groups of 200 houses in broad terms. So we've got a piece of software which develops the whole county into a standard set of 200 dwellings called lower super output areas, and then we map our ability to be able to get to those polygons within an expected time frame. So it's likely on those occasions that there would have been 6 occasions where, although we would believe we could get into that polygon, that area, within the attendance standard, the actual incident is right on the other side of it. So hopefully that makes that a little bit clearer.
Thank you very much. And if I could just ask about smoke alarms, please. One of the problems with smoke alarms and the design generally is the fact that they have to go on the ceiling. And I wonder how many members of the population are actually capable of getting these smoke alarms up onto the ceiling and screwing them on the ceiling, then constantly going back and checking and replacing the batteries. Now, I do this, and it's not easy, and you can overbalance easily. And I wonder if there's any thought ever given to developing the design of the smoke alarm itself to make it more accessible as a tool for fire safety. I'm sure there must be thousands and thousands of households who quite simply couldn't get a smoke alarm on the ceiling. I remember my elderly parents, when they lived at home, they would just stick it on top of a cupboard because they couldn't get up to the ceiling. Of course, we sorted that for them, but they can't be the only ones who are in that situation. And the other thing that worries me about smoke alarms very much is that I didn't know until about a year ago that there are so many different types of smoke alarms that go off in different ways in different circumstances. So if there's a smoke or kitchen fire or oil, some smoke alarms will apparently go off and others won't. And I'm not sure that I know enough to know which type to place in my kitchen, or out or just outside my kitchen. And it's a much, much more complex topic than I think most people understand. So what I'm really asking you is there any thought given to future design of smoke alarms to make the deployment of them easier for people who may not have the flexibility to get up to ceilings? And is there any effort going to be made to educate people about the different type of smoke alarms to deploy in different parts of their houses? Thanks ever so much.
I'm aware, Councillor Brockway, of some smoke detectors being fixed by sort of double-sided tape is one way of fixing smoke alarms, and I've seen them held up whilst the glue sets or wire it sets with like a pie dish on a pole, but I'm sure Ryan can explain it better than me. Over to you, Ryan.
No, I think you've explained it admirably. Yeah, very low tech. Increasingly now, the ability to stick things to the ceiling using sticky pads is just as effective as screwing and gluing them to the ceiling. So that tends to be an approach used by services across the country. And yeah, it's either an inverted dog water bowl or a pie dish of some description to hold it to the ceiling on a broom handle while that sets. A lot of work has been gone just to be able to assure residents and councillors about how effective that method is, and clearly we look at all the fires across the country, and actually it's a very effective way of fixing smoke alarms to the ceiling. Clearly our preference would actually be hardwired smoke detection, and actually there's a requirement for new build properties to have that hardwired in place. So There are an increasing amount of housing stock which has hardwired smoke detection. We would clearly advocate that at new build. It costs very, very little. In fact, we would actually advocate domestic sprinklers, but that's an entirely different subject. Yes, you're absolutely right. There are a number of different types. We can have domestic smoke alarms which are heat sensitive, rate of rise, etc., etc. That sometimes gets around the nuisance setting off of smoke detectors. So when there's light smoke from cooking, or when it's in a cooking environment and there's a lot of hot oil cooking, it can detect the difference, or it's developed to not go off when there's just general light smoke from frying. But when that develops into a flaming combustion, then the smoke alarm will go off. And rate of rise smoke detectors tend to be, or rate of rise heat detectors tend to be a lot more prevalent in commercial cooking environments, and it's certainly something that we take a view of when we go and do a home fire safety check and fit a smoke alarm on behalf of the public. I saw Councillor Sneath also has one of our smoke alarm testing poles, which is a finger on a stick, so that residents can test their smoke alarms without having to resort to climbing on a chair. So yeah, that's something else that we can provide.
I'm glad you saw that. Thank you.
Okay.
Could I come back briefly, Chairman,
yeah,
please,
course,
just
yeah.
very quickly? So that's a great idea, the push stick and the pads, but how does a person then change the battery if they can't get up to the ceiling?
Over to you, Ryan.
The smoke alarms that we install have 10-year batteries, so gone are the days of needing to replace the battery once a year, which with the 9-volt battery once a year was always a thing. They're now 10 or 20-year sealed batteries, so you can't get into them. They're designed to last for in excess of 10 years and up to 20 years, and then they're replaced as a unit.
Councillor Corey would like to bring in speak, so I'll bring her in now, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for those really interesting questions. Talking or responding to Councillor Lee, it seems some time ago now. We, as Ryan said, we do have annual fire station visits, and every member that has a fire station in their division will get an invite. Sadly, I'm upset to report very few attend. And even fewer respond to the invitation to let Councillor Moore and I and the fire service know that they won't be attending. So if you do get an invitation, please respond, please come along, and you'll actually learn a lot. And if you don't have a fire station in your division, but you know someone who does, please urge them to attend, because you will get to know your local fire station. You'll be able to ask all these questions you've been asking this evening, and you may get some tea, you may not, but in terms of the Waddington Training Centre and the County Emergency Centre, I would be very happy to host this committee coming to those venues. I and Councillor Moore attended the Boston Stump exercise some weeks ago, and it was absolutely fantastic. And the community engagement and the community goodwill that was generated there, and not just as a learning exercise for fire and rescue, were absolutely tremendous and invaluable. And finally, what 3 words that seems to have generated quite a bit of interest during this meeting. As community leaders, everybody, we should be taking a lead on this. We have social media outlets, we have that we use on our Twitter feeds and our Facebook pages, through our community newsletters that we send out and when we're having surgeries. So we can do something about that. We can let our communities know that what 3 words is a life-saving development. So it's not just comms that should be doing all the hard work. We, as community leaders, can be supporting fire and rescue and our communities as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Corey. Got Councillor Mrs. Clark, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ryan, for the detailed report and those lovely answers to all the questions. We're learning a lot this morning. Well, certainly I am. On page 39 of your report, oh, I've just lost it. On page 39 of your report, you mentioned about high-risk premises, visiting them at various times of the year, every 12 months. It's been a while now since the terrible incident at Grenfell, but can I ask you, with the new buildings that are going up in Lincoln, are there any buildings within our area that have unsafe cladding that have not yet been dealt with that you're aware of? And how do you go about, if you could explain a bit more in detail about how you go about discussing with developers the kind of materials they should be using to keep people safe within their buildings? Thank you.
Over to you, Ryan.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, very I could go into a very long, complicated answer, so I will try to make it as accessible as I can. So we there's a couple of elements there. Yeah, we have a duty to be a consultee on building control applications. So we will, where there's a high risk in that building or a high complexity of that building, we will submit a return which talks about the means of access for fire and rescue staff, the means of providing firefighting media, so hydrants on site, dry risers if needs be, if it's a high-rise building, and whether there's enough room for us to get our fire engines in, or again, if it's a high-rise building, whether there's enough room for us to site our aerial appliances, which are big long ladders, which will help people effect an escape from the upper floors of a building, or indeed allow our staff to get in or apply firefighting media. So that's the way that we do that. So we do that through building consultation. There has been a new fire services bill put before Parliament, which allows us, it confers a responsibility for people who are submitting planning applications to ensure that we are consulted at what's called Gateway 1. So this is at the very first stage of a planning application. So we have an ability to scrutinise it and say, actually, we feel that you need to consider either the construction of the building in terms of what it's made from, the construction in terms of fire compartmentation and separation between rooms, and common areas, etc. So we do have a lot of input at that stage, and it's going to get more and more, and we will continue to work with local authorities to make sure we're embedded in those groups, mainly to make sure we don't slow down that process, to make sure that we're adequately resourced in those areas, to make sure we're not slowing down development in the local communities and through the local economy. You asked about cladded buildings. So the tragedy of Grenfell back in 2017 highlighted the risk to everyone around what was called aluminium clad materials, which are those cladding panels that are put on the outsides of buildings for aesthetic reasons. They're used predominantly for new builds, but there was a period of time where they were used to spruce up existing buildings, which is what happened in the case of Grenfell. We have got 19 buildings in the county which are classed as high-rise residential buildings. We have been around and inspected all of those buildings. There is one existing now which has clad materials on the outside. So we've worked with the building owners and the residents within that building to make sure there are safe systems in place and to remove and remediate those buildings. So there's only one left in the county. We're working with them to make sure that escape plans and fire alarm systems are upgraded and changed. The big one is around the way that buildings are evacuated in the event of a fire. So traditionally, buildings have been designed with what we call a stay put policy, which means that based on the fact that all buildings should be 30-minute fire compartments. So if there is a fire in a flat, that should not spread beyond that flat for a minimum of 30 minutes, which then gives other people an opportunity to evacuate from the building, and it also provides us an opportunity to go and fight the fire. What we now require is alarm systems in place in some of those buildings where the risk is identified to be able to evacuate people in either a phased approach, so to be able to evacuate a floor or a series of floors, or evacuate the whole building. And clearly what residents need to know is the difference between the fire alarms going off, stay where you are, and the fire alarms going off, you need to take a different set of action. So clearly we're working with the companies that are installing those alarms in the high-rise buildings in Lincolnshire, but also working with the residents, and we will continue to do that.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Sneath down here, but I'm just wondering if Councillor Sneath's contribution was more visual than verbal, but over to you, Councillor Sneath.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it was. I was just showing that hand to you all.
Okay.
I am sitting in my kitchen, so obviously I have got it to hand.
Okay, thank you for that.
Use whenever I need it.
I thought that might be the case. Over to you, Councillor Lee.
Thank you. I'm sorry to come back, but I'm a bit of an anorak about some of this. First of all, the meeting. I think with the very best will in the world, often these meetings and visits are set, we're just given a date, and I'm not the only one that works. I know you work as well, don't you? So before the meeting date is set, can I ask that you come to councillors and perhaps give us 3 dates, and we go for the one that the most people can make? It's really important.
That is exactly the plan.
Oh, bless you, because often it's just set up, you know, and you just think, I haven't got hope in hell of changing that shift at 2 weeks' notice.
Just also to reassure the meeting, the events will be offered to all 70 councillors, which means that not all 70 will be able to attend on one day. We wouldn't expect that. But also, I don't know whether we would have the capacity to have all 70 councillors at once. So we will offer various dates and gauge availability before fixing dates and sending out invitations. Thank you very much.
That was my first one. Right, my next one, with regard to batteries for smoke alarms. Before I moved into my house, I paid, because I was living in London when I moved, and so I had to pay someone locally, a really good contractor, and I've got 2 smoke alarms, and I've had to replace both of them batteries. So I had to get on a chair and stand up and unscrew it, I've got them off Amazon and replaced it. I wish I had one of them sticks that the other councillors got, but I haven't got one of those. But I was told the batteries would last forever, but they didn't. They didn't even last 2 years. And just finally, just about Grenfell, Councillor Clark, I went to Grenfell about a week after it had happened, and it was just breathtakingly awful. It really, really was. And shortly after that, about 6 months after that, I became the Shadow Minister for Fire and Emergency Services, and I did a lot of work on this. I spoke to people like insurance companies, developers. You can imagine how I was lobbied. And I was on the APPG for fire safety with David Amis as well. I used to go to these quite interesting meetings once a month. They had massive agendas. So it's something that really attracted loads and loads of attention. And I have to say, for me, the thing that I gathered, lots of things, but above all else, was a requirement. It should be the fire service who are setting the rules about fire regs, not politicians. And I don't care what colour politician that is. This happens in the NHS. You get people coming in who aren't the people on the ground, and I really firmly believe that the fire service need to be setting the rules for this, because at some point it's going to happen again, because the law hasn't been changed sufficiently, in my opinion, to make it safe. It really has not, and I just can't stress that enough. But that's why I'm such an anorak about this. I'm really interested in fire safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Would you like to come back on those comments, Ryan?
No, only to say that we're clearly really pleased that you do have an interest in it, and it's something that it is a very technical subject. It's something that we need to adequately resource within Lincolnshire. It's an area around our legislative fire safety, so our ability to go out and inspect premises across the county. It takes us 2 years to get an inspecting officer competent and comfortable to actually go out and deliver a service on our behalf in the regulatory arena. We have got a fully resourced department now, although we've had the right numbers for probably 8 or 9 months. We've only just managed to get those people competent and comfortable to go out and deliver a product. So we're in a good place within Lincolnshire. We don't have the same level of high-rise buildings as the rest of the country do. We have 19 that qualify as high-rise. Clearly, when we looked at the Grenfell Tower inquiry has been divided into two parts. The phase one looked at the initial response on the evening. That came out with a load of recommendations, and we have produced an internal report to make sure that we have been mindful of those recommendations, and we've taken action where we need to.
Can I just say, from my perspective, I went to that inquiry a couple of times and sat through a couple of days, and it felt very much to me at the very beginning that some people were trying to scapegoat the fire service, and I wouldn't have that for a second. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ryan, I've got a number of questions for you, but I'm aware that you've been talking for quite some time now, so feel free to just do yes or no answers, or just keep them as brief as you can. But on page 30, it mentions the safety and well-being visits. Can you just explain to the committee how they tie in with other service areas and also other authorities, please? Because it's not just a fire and rescue thing. So just very briefly, how you tie in with other service areas and authorities, please.
Yeah, so a number of years ago, we moved away from home fire safety checks to safe and well visits. So our home fire safety check, we went into people's houses and we assessed their risk of fire only. So we went in, we gave some advice, we fitted a smoke detector if it was needed. What we've moved to is a person-centred approach. So we work with our partners in social care environments and again further afield. We recognise that we can be the eyes and ears. People trust the Fire and Rescue Service brand. So when we go into people's houses, we can also identify if there's the potential for them to need other care services in other care environments, and we can signpost to some of those areas. So there's a lot of work we do around hoarding. We do some work around financial scams. So we have a number of people who are trained to engage with the community around their susceptibility to being taken advantage of by fraudsters, etc. So we engage right the way across the board and make sure that we're making referrals to some of our internal LCC partners, but also outside to other organisations and voluntary groups. And what that does mean is that we also benefit from referrals into the Fire and Rescue Service. So as our colleagues in adult social care, etc., go out and identify vulnerable people, they can also refer them to us, and we can ensure they're safe from fire as well.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Page 34, you mentioned there's another acronym there, THRIVE. Could you just explain what THRIVE is, please?
I can. Yeah, so THRIVE is our behavioural framework. So clearly we have the Lincolnshire values for Lincolnshire County Council. Within Fire and Rescue, we make sure that people know what that means to us, and we've tried to personalise it to people in their roles. So THRIVE is trust. So we need to work in an environment of mutual trust. Help. Clearly, our whole purpose of being here is to help the community, and that should extend beyond fire. So where we identify someone who has further needs, then we ought to be trying to signpost them to somewhere where they can get help. Respect is clearly self-explanatory. We need to have respect for each other. Include or inclusive. So the fact that everyone should be able to be themselves at work. Value, that we value the contribution of everyone in the organisation, and empower. And this is about driving decision-making ability right the way down to the levels at which people can genuinely make a difference.
Okay, thank you. Page 37, R42, it mentions that we will review accident injury trends to identify cause and make recommendations to reduce future events. It has been known for fire station roller shutter doors not to be in a fully open position when the fire appliance is either coming out or going or being reversed in. Is that something you've got to grips with? Is that improved over the years, not only causing damage to the fire appliance but to the building too?
Yeah, it has historically been something that has been known to happen. It's something that hasn't happened for a period of time, and yes, you're absolutely right. So we've put in place both mechanical and human methods of preventing that. So we now have lighting on the fire appliance bay doors that flash to show when the appliance bay doors aren't in the fully open position. Often it's because the appliance bay door is being part closed for a particular reason, and then people forget they've part closed it and then back into the appliance bay. It hasn't happened for a number of years. You're right, on a broader scale, we do monitor accident trends, and our Health and Safety Committee monitor that on a monthly basis and report back any corrective actions. But no, it's to provide some assurance it hasn't happened for some time.
Okay, thank you. R71 mentioned over the border meetings per division. Good to see that over the border meetings are being held. I just wanted to talk about down the south of the county, which I know best. Such stations such as Market Deep in Stamford, Crowland, they could find themselves first in attendance at something like Peterborough Hospital or Peterborough Prison or a block of flats. And they're used to relatively flat terrains. And I'm just wondering that do the stations have detailed plans of these premises, and do they have details of known risks?
You're in luck. The south of the county is also, having come from Cambridgeshire Fire and Rescue Service, is also an area that I know best. To answer your question in two parts. So we provide on our mobile data terminals, which has been referenced already in this meeting. The mobile data terminals are, in essence, a computer on the fire engine, which is demountable. That provides information around buildings and building risks and the first actions that should be taken by crews when they attend some of those buildings. So rendezvous points, etc., where water is. We provide operational information to significant risks which fall within 10 miles of the county border. So we will provide information of those risks. So if it was Peterborough Prison or Peterborough Hospital. Also, Cambridgeshire Fire and Rescue Service are also required to provide an integrated risk management plan, which will outline the risk again of an over-the-border appliance attending a risk which falls within their county. So they will also have control measures in place to make sure that the adequate information is passed so that Lincolnshire have the right information should they attend a Cambridgeshire risk. There's a lot of cross-border working that goes on with some of those marginal risks. So somewhere like Burley House in the south of the county, we undertake a lot of joint exercising around salvage, and they're on and off-site plans. Things like Stamford Storage at Essendine, again, historically has been a coma site, and we will work with Lincolnshire, Cambridgeshire and Leicestershire around sites like that to make sure that we all understand each other's procedures and we have the right information.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. PP 4.2 on page 41 mentions incidents of special interest. Also talks about policies updated in line with outlined identified requirements, local policies current and reflect national guidance. Councillor Lee has already spoken about Grenfell. I also visited Grenfell a month or so afterwards. But things like the Manchester Arena bombing are some seriously wrong decisions that was made at the time. Things like the police wouldn't let the fire service in the building straight away, in fact, probably not until an hour afterwards. Have we learnt from that, and should there be a serious incident like that in Lincolnshire, have you got the autonomy to go straight into the building, or do you still have to wait for the police to say so?
So without getting into the detail of the Manchester Arena bombing, a lot of lessons were learned at that incident. To provide some assurance, nationally, the National Fire Chiefs Council and Fire and Rescue Services working within it have got together, and we've got a number of programmes which alleviate that risk somewhat. So we have a new set of national operational guidance for all those incident types. So all Fire and Rescue Services will be working to the same incident criteria and standards. We have what we call JOL, which is joint operational learning, and NOL, which is national operational learning. The difference between those is national operational learning is fire specific. So where we learn something within Lincolnshire, we will share that with the other fire and rescue services in the country, and vice versa. So we've got a library of national learning from those incident types. Joint operational learning is exactly the same, but it's multi-agency partners. So the police, the ambulance will also put things on that site, and we will jointly debrief those incident types. The crux of the issue in Greater Manchester was the co-location of emergency services. So police, fire and ambulance weren't in the same place at a major incident level. So those goals command decision makers were at their own command sites and not at a joint established location. That's something that wouldn't happen in Lincolnshire. We would co-locate immediately, certainly to be making those decisions. So actually, in terms of whether or not fire have the autonomy to go into the site. It would be really clear as to who had powers of entry, why we would be going in the first place, and what role we'd be undertaking should we go in.
Okay, thank you. PE61, page 43, it mentions training, competence, skills, etc. I seem to remember a recent, well, I say recent HMI inspection, it was a year or two back now, there was a criticism by the inspector regarding the recording of training. I see on that page you mentioned the PDRP Pro records. Has that addressed the problem that, or the perceived problem there was?
In a nutshell, yes. So yeah, we were aware of the issue at the time. We were about to procure a system which centrally located our training records, made them accessible to managers, first line management, so they could scrutinise the competence of their staff. At the time of the inspection back in 2000, I think it was 17, we were aware of that issue. We were in the process of procuring it. Clearly, the HMI came in before that was in place, and we had a workaround around spreadsheets and databases at the time. We were able to implement PDR Pro within 6 months, and all of our staff are now on that. We have got some further developments we'd like to make to the system in terms of continuing professional development, which sits outside of our operational requirement, and we're beginning to make those improvements in line with business as usual.
Thank you. Just one more from me, so I'll make it an easy one for you, Ryan. RE 3.3 on page 46. We will ensure our estate and facilities remain fit for purpose. Could you just tell us the latest on the provision of a new fire station for Leverton, please?
I can provide an update such as it is. So yes, there is an intention to put a fire station at Leverton. I think the next stage is identifying the parcel of land and going into that purchase arrangement. But yeah, that is proceeding.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further questions from anyone, Councillor Stokes? No? Okay. So the actions of this committee is invited to review, consider the scrutiny arrangements in section 3, page 29, and determine if there's a need for more information. I believe we've had quite an in-depth question in there, and my proposal is that I move that the committee endorse the report and that our comments, as recorded, considering scrutiny arrangements, are taken under consideration. Can you please raise your hand if you agree to that? Okay, thank you. That's all agreed. And I'd just like to say thank you very much, Ryan. We've put you on the spot there and give you a bit of a hard time, I feel, but you've answered all the questions very well. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 8, which is the Public Protection and Community Scrutiny Committee Work Programme. This item is on pages 54 to 57 of the agenda pack. The report will be presented by Cara, our Scrutiny Officer. Over to you, Cara.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So this item is a standing agenda item, and it enables the committee to consider and comment on the content of its own work programme for the coming year, and to ensure that activity is focused where it can be of greatest benefit. Members of the committee are therefore invited to review this work programme and highlight any additional scrutiny activity that could and should be included for consideration in the work programme. I would like to make you aware that since the publication of this agenda, the 1st of November, there has been no further changes or amendments on the work programme. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any comments? I'd just like to remind the committee that the scope of this committee is volunteering support, financial inclusion, community engagement and development, community hubs, library services and archives, heritage services, preventing and reducing crime, tackling domestic abuse, fire and rescue and emergency response, trading standards, emergency planning, road safety, reducing antisocial behaviour, registration, celebratory and coroner services. We've certainly had some of those so far this year, and some of those are included, but some are not. That, if you can think from those headings, anything you'd like to see in future. I recall we had animal health and welfare review a year or so ago. Was that just a one-off, or do we get that now and again?
I will have to go back and check that, but I think it was a one-off.
Okay, I think that was September last year. Councillor Key.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You did mention, obviously, reducing crime is one of our areas, and I think the thing that still bothers a lot of people is the online crimes and scams. And I don't know whether that's something the committee have looked at before, but I know it worries a lot of people, especially elderly people, and through the pandemic when they've been vulnerable at home. I think that is a really important area.
Good point, thank you. Can that be something we can consider?
Yes, recorded for consideration. Thank you, Councillor Key.
Okay, thank you. Are there anyone else there? Okay, so I'll make that the end of the meeting. So that concludes the business for this morning. Thank